Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our RPA webinar this afternoon. Really, the purpose of today's session is just to give everybody a little introduction, a taster, if you like, of RPA, what it means, what it looks like, and we'll actually be taking you through a bit of a demo this afternoon to give you an understanding of how RPA might function in the real world. In terms of the agenda today then, so as I say, we're really just going to give everybody an introduction as to what RPA is, sort of the typical uses of RPA and robots in the business, and then we'll be looking at some of the benefits and also taking you through a live demonstration today. Just to give you a little bit of background on Velocity before we start, we were established back end of 2010, but we've been involved in process automation of one form or another since the early 2000s. We have offices based in India, South Africa, and head office in the UK, so the majority of our work is actually UK based, but we have development teams out in India and South Africa to support that. The kind of work that we get involved in is predominantly all around digital transformation and optimization, so business process management, process automation, obviously RPA that we're touching on today, also workflow automation, some cognitive technologies, so AI, machine learning and sentiment analysis, that kind of thing, and also quite a bit of work around BI and data analytics, and most of those sort of areas form the projects and solutions that we get involved with organisations globally. The kind of services that we deliver for those organisations, well, it starts at the sort of discovery stage, so we work very closely with our clients to understand their businesses, understand the processes and the way that they're working, and how we can apply automation to those. We then move from there to sort of the design, development and deployment of those solutions, and quite often we're doing that end-to-end delivery, but as a consultative business we also offer augmentation services to teams of people and support services and training enablement. Moving on now to what is RPA and how do we see RPA as a solution. I think that the first thing to say here really is that we don't see RPA as a silver bullet. It's not the answer to every problem in a business and certainly not the answer to every automation problem, but it is one of those tools that we have in our toolkit, and one of those solutions that can be very effective within organisations. Essentially, RPA is a software-driven process automation tool, and it emulates the human actions that you have within a process. So when we look at a process that you may have within the organisation, what we're looking to do is to remove that human interaction and replace that with robotics, or to augment it with robotics. So in some circumstances you'll have a process that requires human intervention or human decision making, and it's those kind of processes where the actual robot will augment what the human is doing. We see it as being both strategic and a tactical solution, but we've highlighted tactical there because where we're seeing robotics being used quite frequently at the moment are in very sort of distinct tactical solutions, while the business is doing larger scale digital optimization projects. People are using RPA perhaps to leverage existing technologies or legacy technologies, making the most of those, or actually putting in tactical solutions while they're building out something larger within the organisation, really just to get those efficiency gains and ROI in quickly. So essentially, RPA or robotics mirrors the existing process, and that's where we start. We sort of look at those processes and decide and agree where that automation can come into place, and it automates those steps within the process, either as the end-to-end process or as part of an augmentation with human interaction as well. It's completely scalable, so one of the nice things about robotics is that it functions 24/7, 365 days a year. If you find that the robot can't process enough for you, then it's simply a question of adding additional robots. So once a robot's trained, obviously it carries out that process to the letter in great detail and in great accuracy. And if we want to clone that and put in place another robot, we can do. We don't have to think about all the overheads of human resources actually employing additional people or additional FTEs to give you that scalability. So, a robotic effect or a robot effectively acts as the hands and the eyes of the operator. I think it's important to make the point here that it doesn't act as the brain. Obviously the robot can only function based on the rules that you give it, and obviously it can make decisions based on those rules, but if you have something that falls out of those rules, those guidelines, those algorithms, then it's at that point you'll want to hand that off to a human. But effectively, whatever we do with robotics, they're being trained initially by a human and programmed by a human, so you still retain that control. Where we do find robotics being used to great extent at the moment is in processes where they're large volumes of transactional tasks that require great accuracy. What we often find with human operatives is that they get distracted, they sometimes get bored because they're doing a process time and time again, and sometimes that leads to inaccuracies in data or inaccuracies in the way that they're entering data into systems. Obviously with a robot, once it's been trained on what it needs to do, it has 100% accuracy. So where we're seeing the advantage there is that when you're running reports, when you're doing analysis on your data, you're getting far greater levels of accuracy in the information that's being recorded. And as we've already mentioned, the nice thing about robotics is that they don't get distracted, they don't take coffee breaks, they don't take holidays. Okay, your systems may go down for a very short period of time, but generally speaking, those robotics are running 24/7, 365 days a year. So in terms of utilization, you're getting far more out of that bot than you would a human FTE. So where does RPA work well? Where do we see it being deployed? Where do we see it being best suited to? Well, clearly it's got to be some form of digital process. So we're looking at sort of invoice processing, we're looking at data transfer, we're looking at any tasks that dealing with digital data, and we're looking at tasks that are predominantly rules-based so that we can define what those rules are, we can build the robot to follow those rules, and then based on certain triggers we can set that automation in process. In terms of cost effectiveness, really you want to be looking at processes that deal with high volumes of data, because we want to be churning that through the robot frequently, basically, and obviously we would expect that process to have very repetitive steps, so you're going through the same process time and time again with very highly defined metrics. And what you'll see at the top of this slide is really just a bit of a graphic that takes you through how robotics work, how they gather the information, the steps that they take in terms of functioning. So in terms of typical applications, again, I won't go through this in huge detail, but what we've done on the left-hand side is we've picked up some core areas of business operations, so finance, HR, operations, customer service, IT, and then we've sort of highlighted some of the areas where we're seeing robotics being used to great effect. So in finance, it's sort of purchase to payment systems, it's purchase requisitions, data extraction and reporting, perhaps looking at invoice and remittance areas, accounts receivable, and so on and so forth. With HR, application and CV processing, employee onboarding, perhaps in some cases, employee offboarding, unfortunately. But really any of those, again, repetitive form-based tasks that can be automated. That's where we're seeing robotics fitting into HR. With operations, it tends to be around supply chain cost calculations, contract initiations, and again, contract onboarding, and so on and so forth. And then customer service, we can look to things like SLA management, underwriting and account creation, order processing, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the typical applications, but again, what I would urge everybody to do is to kind of look at the processes that you're currently following, what you have currently within the business, and then actually looking at those and their effectiveness, the speed at which they're being undertaken, and looking to see whether or not actually you can envisage how automation would actually speed that process up, give you greater accuracy, or where it can be applied within the in the business. So where do we see the benefits of RPA? Well, I think, really the main thing with RPA is what we're looking to do is we're looking to free up people's time. So generally we're looking at processes that are currently being undertaken by human operatives. They tend to be repetitive data processing type processes, as we've already talked about, and so they tend to be fairly mundane in their nature, very repetitive tasks. So what we're looking to do is to free up humans from having to undertake those tasks so that we can get robots to do them far quicker and more accurately and more efficiently. And more scalably. So again, as your businesses grow, as your businesses change, as your customer demands or your customer expectations change, we can adapt the robots and scale the robots to suit. So very rapid to actually deploy robotics. So from that point of view, we can get a very quick productivity gains and very quick return on investment. And that means that, again, very quickly you can reallocate those valuable human resources to doing something else within the business, perhaps something more valuable to the business, more valuable to that employee, and more interesting to that employee, maybe more strategic to the business, and give you an opportunity to look at other areas and to grow that business because of the availability of those resources. Reduce labour expenses, again, because we're not having to look at employing additional people, additional FTEs to undertake those tasks and those processes and to grow the business and scale the business accordingly. We've already talked about the accuracy of that data, but again, you get that consistency and accuracy of data, which tends to be of huge value to most of the clients that we talk to. We're also seeing, obviously, within things like financial services and with other regulated organisations, there is far more compliance creeping in. So from a robotics point of view, we have that complete traceability. We have that audit trail as to what was done, when it was done, how long did it take to do it, etc. And so from a compliance and regulatory auditability point of view, you're getting all of that accuracy and all of that data at your fingertips. So it makes for compliance, or it makes compliance far easier, really. With robotics, we can apply that to data processing. So again, we can pull data from multiple sources, and whether that's either from current sources or from legacy systems, but it makes business intelligence and analytics of your data far easier because we can combine those data sources, giving you a very accurate, clear and comprehensive understanding of what's going on within the business. And overall, we would suggest that with robotics, it's extremely easy to measure the return on investment that you get from actually deploying, either one, two, or multiple robots across the business, satisfying multiple processes in tow. So those are some of the benefits. I mean, obviously they're wider spread than just that, and what we do with all of our clients is we work very closely with them to build out the business case for robotics and for process automation, and so we can get down to a very granular level in terms of what that ROI might look like for you specifically. We're now going to move on to a bit of a demonstration around robotics, just to show you how that might function and really just to pull some of these trains of thought together for you. The demo that we've actually built for you today is a fairly simple manual process that hopefully everybody can identify with. Essentially, it's all built around the change of address. So if we take something along the lines of an insurance company where they have multiple clients, perhaps they get change of address forms or change of contract details forms, but this could be invoicing, it could be customer services. It's essentially based around the fact that an email will be received by the organisation sent in from the client. That will drop into a caseworker's email inbox. And under manual sort of terms, the caseworker would then obviously log into the inbox, they'd review the email. In this case, it's a change of address form. So what we're going to do is we're then going to log into a back-end system, a CRM system for want of a better term, and we're going to check that that customer is a live, active customer. So it's we're checking for authenticity there at that point. And having verified that, we're then going to update the contact details within that back-end system from the change of address form that was received by the client. So the manual caseworker is having to re-enter all of that data, and again, this is where the accuracy creeps in. Having done all of that, we'll send an email back out to the customer to say thank you very much. We've processed your change of address, and we'll move that email from the inbox into a processed folder. At the end of the day, hopefully by the time that the caseworker's done that, you've got a happy client. But you can appreciate all of the steps there that a human operative is having to go through, from logging into the email, reading the email, reviewing the attached form, logging into the back-end system, verifying that it's an active client, changing all the details over, saving that, and so on and so forth. Compared to what we would see a robot doing, and that is effectively far fewer steps, in that the robot will be seen to be monitoring the inbox, and as soon as it identifies that there's an email there, it'll pick that email up, log into the system, and do all of those tasks itself automatically. Now, the actual demo that we've set up today, we're going to take 5 emails out of the inbox and process those, just to show you how that robot can do those sequentially and very, very quickly, and give you an understanding of how that might compare to a human operative being able to do that. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to come out of the presentation now and drop into to the demo scenario. So the first thing we're going to look at is the email client, where you can see that we've got 5 emails that have landed into the inbox, all with change of address forms attached to them. And if I just scroll across, you can see here that we've got the actual change of address details form. So this is the form that the robot's going to pick up from the email and transfer the data into our back-end CRM system. If we actually look at the robot itself, you can see here that we're actually in the robotics studio. So this is where we've configured our robot. And if I just scroll up and down, you can see that just a list of sequential tasks that the robot's actually going to undertake. So this is how we've trained the robot to do everything. On the left-hand side, we have a number of assets and controls that we can actually choose to just drag and drop onto this screen to actually configure the robot. So in terms of that configuration, very quick, very easy to do, and very easy to deploy. Once we've built that robot, it's simply a question of clicking on run, and that will activate the robot to do its thing, basically, to go through the process. And what you'll see once we do click run is it will go to the email inbox. It'll look at the emails. It will then log into the back-end system, check the records, and then start to update them. And you'll see that being updated sequentially. And then we'll be able to see that the email at the end of the day has been pushed to a process folder rather than the inbox, and that all the records have been updated in our back-end system. So I'm just going to click on run, so we can see it's looking at the inbox. It's now gone to our back-end client management system. It's logged into that client management system, and it's typed in the account number for the first record. It's found that record, and it's now updating the contact details in that record line by line. You saw that it was done successfully. It's moved on to the second record now, and again it's going through exactly the same process of logging in via the account number, updating each of those records, and we're now moving on to record number 3. So that's happening, as you can see, extremely quickly, certainly quicker than I could ever type, and more accurately than I could ever type. And each of those records in turn are being updated. Okay, so we're on to, I think, the final one now. successfully updated, and that's the process done. So it's now returned me back to the robot screen, but if I scroll down and I now have a look at my inbox, you'll be able to see that actually all of those emails have moved across to the process folder. If I go back to my inbox, it's now empty. Just scrolling across to the client management system, you'll see that now last updated column, 4th of April 12/23, you can see that those top 5 records have now been updated, or last updated, and they've all been updated by bot number 1. If I drill down into that record, you'll be able to see that actually in that system we have an audit record, basically to say that that change of address from the old value to the new value happened again 12/23 today, and it was updated by robot 1. So that's the robot has actually done exactly the same as that human task that we mapped out in the presentation. It's undertaken all of those tasks, and you can see exactly how quickly and accurately that's all been done without any real human intervention. Obviously, I triggered the task, but how that would work in the real world is that robot would constantly be polling the email inbox, and as soon as an email lands, it would pick those up and action them. So what we've seen there, and it's obviously really difficult to sort of compare this against a human, but I think if you consider a human trying to do that task, you're probably looking around 5 minutes for a human to undertake that task, whereas the robot, we probably saw that doing it in about 20 seconds, so a 15 times quicker really for the robot. If we then consider that obviously a human works 8 hours a day, whereas a robot works 24 hours a day, you can see at the bottom of the screen the difference in numbers of transactions that you might get from a robot compared to a human operative. Now, I'm not obviously suggesting that you're going to get 4,320 changes of addresses in a 24-hour period, but if you consider that robot can do many tasks within that period, it doesn't just have to do the change of address. You might have it doing other things in the time that it's not doing that one task or that one process. You can realistically look to replace a number of human operatives and the processes that they're doing with a single robot. So really, just to summarize then before we sort of kick off with the questions, the way that we kind of see robots, and possibly one of the easiest ways of thinking about them, is to think of them as a virtual workforce. Think about the human processes that you're going through at the moment, or the processes that are being managed by human operatives. If I can train a human to do something, then realistically we can train a robot to do that task as well. They operate 365 days a year, 24/7. So again, in terms of efficiencies, you get far more out of a robot because you don't have any of that downtime for holidays, coffee breaks, training, and so on and so forth. They can transform mundane and transactional tasks. Again, what we're looking to do is really give your teams, your employees, a far more involving, engaging role, taking them away from those mundane transactional tasks and replacing them with a bot or a robot that actually doesn't mind how often it does the same thing time and time again. That gives us the ability to redistribute those resources for you to use in a better way. We've talked about the accuracy of data. I think the other thing that we find when we come to resource redistribution is that staff and employees find far greater job satisfaction by doing things that involves them and by things where they can make a decision and make a real impact rather than, again, those mundane transactional tasks. So that has an impact on staff turnover and staff retention and so on and so forth, again saving money. Obviously, because we're pushing things through robotics, you saw how quickly we can do things, so it increases productivity. And by doing that, we can often increase customer satisfaction because whilst they don't necessarily need to know that they're engaging with a bot or there's a bot doing that process in the background, it is happening far quicker and more accurately. So, the response back to that customer tends to be quicker and more accurate. Obviously, as we've already said, we can build a very quick ROI because we can deploy robots extremely quickly and extremely effectively within a business, which means you're starting to see that return literally from day one. And obviously what robotics is doing and what process automation is doing in general is supporting your ability to grow the business and reach your business goals and your business objectives perhaps that little bit quicker and more effectively and less painfully. So that really sort of brings us to the end of our brief sort of introduction to RPA. I think the final thing to say is that obviously we'd be very happy to engage in a more detailed manner with anybody that wants to sort of get involved in a more comprehensive conversation around robotics, and we're very happy to sort of build out a demonstration that might resonate with your business or might be more appropriate to your business, if that's something you would like us to look at. Obviously, you can contact us, directly through the website, or you've got my email address at the bottom of the screen there, roger@velocityit.com. So happy to take any questions on that. So we've got a number of questions then that have dropped into the sort of question area on GoToMeeting. So we'll sort of try and address those as best we can. First one, with regards to time savings using RPA gives, how do you see companies taking advantage of this? Is it pure cost saving exercise, or do they redeploy employees onto more valuable and added activities? I think that it's a really good question, and what we do get involved with a lot at the outset of any project is really discussing with clients what they are going to get out of robotics in terms of costs and time savings. And I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all answer. It will vary from company to company, but generally speaking, where we see the savings is there is a definite cost saving. Primarily because we can demonstrate that actually by deploying robots we can deploy those at a lower cost to organisations having to employ people to undertake those tasks. I think there are additional cost savings in terms of the speed at which we can undertake those tasks, the volume of tasks we can push through a robot at any one time, which obviously leads to cost savings. And then obviously there are cost savings in the fact that we haven't got to necessarily train individuals to do that task or replacement individuals to do that task. Robotics sits very well with processes that might be seasonal, so you have to have more output at different times of the year. Traditionally people would employ more people at those times of year, but obviously we can do that through robotics without that additional cost. I think there's also cost savings in terms of customer retention and customer satisfaction. And then you've got the savings that are made, as the question alludes to, around redeploying employees to be able to do other things within the organisation that, again, historically you'd either have to employ more people to do, or perhaps you wouldn't be able to do or adopt, and that might impact on your growth or your overall objectives. Hopefully that answers that question for the person that raised it, but again, if not, very happy to take that in more detail, either via email or via a call after this webinar. So a couple of other questions here then. So we've got a question around how RPA would work with integrations such as JD Edwards, SAP, Dynamics, Ultrix, etc. And again, I think that's a really good question. Within any of the projects we deploy, there generally tends to be some form of integration. And we can either integrate through APIs, and many of those APIs do exist, but we can also use robotics quite cleverly in terms of integrations, perhaps for older systems where the integrations don't exist, or for one that we had recently looking specifically at JDE, some intricacies that were in the way that we had to integrate with their web front end. And basically what we can do there with robotics is we can actually train the robot to write the information that we're looking to integrate between both systems. So rather than doing a back-end integration through the API while we're perhaps writing data directly to the database, we're actually writing that into the system as if it was a human, very similar to the way that you've seen the robot work today. So there's a number of ways that we can achieve that level of integration. again, probably not a one-size-fits-all. It depends on what systems you've got in place and what it is you're looking to achieve. But certainly we can do a number of things around integration. So again, hopefully that answers that question. Next one, what if the process requires a human decision? Well, again, a really good question, because a lot of processes that we have within our organization require some level of decision making, and you might not be able to write a rule around those decisions or have an algorithm that matches those decision criteria. So quite often we're using what we would call attended robots. Difference between attended and unattended. Obviously, an unattended one is one that sits in the background and does the whole process for you, very much like you've seen today. An attended one, it actually sits alongside a human operative and will generally at some point hand off to a human operative. So if we take the example of the change of address form, it may well be that when the robot picks up the email, reads the form, logs into the back-end system to verify that that form has come from an active customer, if it can't find that active customer, or there's an anomaly in that record, or between the record and the change of address form, it may then say, okay, I can't handle this, I need to push that to a human operative, in which case we build into the workflow and the training of that robot the ability to hand off to a human and say, I need you to make a decision on this. The human operative can then look at that, verify it, can either continue the tasks themselves, or it can actually instruct the robot to say, yep, this is fine, carry on with the task. But we can definitely, create processes that are a mixture of robotics and human interaction. So again, I hope that helps. So the next question and the final one we've got is sort of how do you start a project and what considerations before starting? Well, again, generally, we start by looking at things from a process first approach. So we start by looking at your processes, by understanding those processes, mapping those out, making sure those processes are as lean as they can be and as appropriate for the business. And then from there, we'll start mapping that into to the system, either the robotics or some form of process automation solution, and build it out from there. And generally, we'll start with something, fairly small within the organisation, something that we can build out very quickly. So that we can get that in front of the business to actually comment back on, and make sure that that's going to meet the requirements, if you like, and then it's a question of refining from there. So we tend to start small and build out from there. Most of our clients, what we tend to find is that as soon as you get that initial traction with robotics, as soon as people see how robots are picking up those processes and actively managing those processes, people are then coming to us and saying, well, okay, if we can do that in this department, what can we do in this department? Is this a process we can automate? How do we go about the next steps? And very quickly, we're building out more and more automations within that organization, and quite typically enabling that organization to continue to build their own automations with our support in the background. We feel it's very important, certainly from an ROI and a success factors point of view, that actually our clients are empowered to build their own automations and take this software on board and make the most of it within their own internal teams, again with our support and perhaps our augmentation services alongside. So again, I hope that answers the question. I hope people have found that useful today, and again, very happy to pick that up as a separate discussion if it's something that you'd like to take a little bit further. So again, my name is Roger Peacock. You can reach me at roger@velocity-it.com. I'd like to thank everybody for their time today. We will be sending out a link to the video for this webinar that you can download later on, should you wish to review it again. And again, thank you very much for your time.